The following is sponsored by our friends and community supporters at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. McNeese Wheeler is a boutique law firm in Spokane, handling matters in both Washington and Idaho. Areas of law include business law, wills, trusts and estates, family law, personal injury and wrongful death, and real estate matters. For your full-service legal needs, contact McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Welcome to On the JoB with your host, LeAnn Parrish, editor of the Journal of Business. On the JoB is about the Inland Northwest business community, where you'll hear firsthand the backstories from the men and women reporters at the Journal of Business. On the JoB is brought to you in part by McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Here's LeAnn.
Hi, thanks for joining me. This is On the JoB with LeAnn Parrish, editor of the Journal of Business. Let's see, at the Journal, we just came out with our first issue of the new year, first issue 2018. Indeed. And we had our book of lists that came out 2 weeks before, but it's been a while since we published. It feels good to be out there again.
It does.
Yeah, I'm here with LeAnn Bjerken. She's our finance reporter, but she does a lot of other stuff, including stories about industrial space, as we had in this issue. I thought this story was one of the more interesting stories that we had in the paper this time, and I appreciate you joining us to talk about it a little bit. Am I allowed to say that stories are? Do I have to treat them like?
I think so.
Do I have to treat them like kids? I love them all the same, or?
It did end up being a pretty interesting topic.
Yeah, good. So why don't you explain to us the market dynamic for industrial space within the Inland Northwest, if you would?
So what we'd been hearing about and what we wanted to focus on with this piece was that there's currently this lack of good large industrial spaces both in the Spokane area as well as parts of northern Idaho. So in talking with some of the experts that I talked with for the story, they sounded like the vacancy rate for industrial space in Spokane County currently is at 2.6. So quite a bit lower than what it used to be for various reasons. And lease rates are also up around 33 cents per square foot right
Sure.
now for industrial space.
Sure. So what were those lease rates about a year ago compared to what they are now?
It sounds like compared to last year, there hasn't really been much of a change. But things are generally increasing.
Sure, but it's something that's changed over the last 4 or 5 years or so.
Yes.
So at 2.6% vacancy, just as a place of perspective, when you look at office space downtown, it's up into the double digits, and in most other parts of the Spokane area, office space, the vacancy rate will be 9 to 11%. So comparatively, 2.6% is pretty tight.
Yeah,
pretty tight market.
pretty tight.
And what were some of the reasons what's the why? What are some of the reasons that the market's so tight?
Well, there's a couple of factors that are coming into play here. It sounds like one of the more interesting factors at play is the fact that in the last couple of years, with the legalization of recreational marijuana, you're starting to see more of these larger indoor grow operations taking up industrial spaces that were previously vacant for whatever reason, whether that's companies that decided they can't use that space because it just doesn't meet their purposes, or maybe they couldn't lease it because the rates were too high.
Sure. Now, an interesting part of that is that, or one of the more interesting numbers in your story was that about 1.5 million square feet were absorbed in that 2012, 2013 area.
Yeah, that's what I had heard. Yeah.
When it was first
legalized. Yeah.
Now, are there other? Is it still a dynamic where those growers are looking for more space, or are there other factors that have come into play in the current market?
That's another interesting thing. I had talked to someone who actually operates a grow operation, and he had sounded like in the next couple of years, you're going to see more of these grow operations that are competing heavily against other types of grow operations that can make better use of outdoor lighting. Because the problem facing a lot of the operations right now is that there's just too many producer processors in the industry right now and not enough people to sell to.
So supply outweighs demand
Exactly.
in that market right now. Yeah.
So some of these operations that maybe are struggling to meet the needs of keeping all of their indoor plants well lighted and things like that in these spaces are maybe going to be finding that they can't keep going in the next couple of years. So some of those spaces might actually be opening up again.
Okay.
We'll have to see.
So we might see some loosening there.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting aspect of it. And the person that you talked to, I think it was Kip Paulson, right?
Yes.
And he had a building that had sat dormant for years. Isn't that right? Can you kind of tell us
Yeah,
that
he
dynamic?
sounded like it can sometimes be difficult to find people that want to lease these larger spaces for whatever reason. He has used some of his space to rent it out to people who are looking for storage for boats and RVs, that kind of thing. But as far as large industrial operations, it's just difficult to find tenants.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, marijuana is recreational marijuana is legal in Washington. It's illegal in Idaho. But when you talk to people in North Idaho, has the absorption of space had any effect on the market over there?
They sounded like it has, just because when you have marijuana grow operations that occupy these spaces, that the big factor is when the landowners are looking to lease to grow operations, they also have to take on a certain amount of risk, whether that's security concerns with the property or the proximity of these tenants to other non-industry tenants that might create issues with smell for packaging or
Sure.
Manufacturing processes. I lost my train of thought now.
No, that's okay. But I think what you're saying is that,
Yeah.
not every industrial space is ripe for that industry, for the marijuana industry.
Exactly.
But where it was absorbing space, that where it was appropriate, it would then push other tenants to those spaces that maybe weren't ideal for grow operations.
Yeah, so they have seen some people that are interested in more spaces in Idaho, but it's not necessarily due to the fact that all of the space being taken up here is being used for marijuana operations.
Sure. And we're talking a lot about that industry, but there are other economic factors with the improving economy and absorption, expansion of other types of business as well.
Exactly. Most of the experts that I talked to sounded like it's less about space that's being taken up by marijuana industry folks as much as it is economic factors.
Sure.
Because right now we've got the shortage of construction laborers,
Sure.
as well as higher costs for building and the materials to build with.
Right. Which makes those projects more expensive, more difficult to pencil out at
Exactly.
33 cents per square foot. Yeah. So, separate from your reporting, though, we saw a couple other stories in this edition about industrial buildings being built or planned to be built. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So two of those stories were they both in our most recent edition?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
Well, are you talking about the
yeah.
Barger Road and the Playfair?
Yes.
Yeah, they both were.
So some of our other reporters had talked about two newer industrial areas that are being developed right now. One was an upcoming project in the Playfair Commerce Park for building two new warehouses out that way. And the interesting thing that I had noticed in that story is that the builder for that project I believe it was the builder, had mentioned that it's being built to general specifications
Sure.
rather than built to suit. So they were of the opinion that that's creating more interest in that space, which I think makes sense. Just because when you have a space that's a little less finished and built specifically for a certain industry or company, that gives new tenants more room to do what they want with the space rather than being stuck with something that's already built in a certain way and
Sure.
they feel like they're kind of stuck.
Yeah, well, and the developers of Playfair have had some success with that model already, building speculatively.
Exactly.
And being able to fill those buildings by and large. For those of you who don't know, the Playfair Commerce Park is on the old Playfair racetrack site in East Spokane, just off of Sprague, not far from the core, a couple miles from the core. So, was there another project that you were mentioning?
So the Barker Road project that you had talked about, that is a industrial building that's going up out on Barker Road in northeast Spokane Valley, if you will.
Sure.
The part that I found interesting about that story is that site is actually nearby the new Katera site, as well as the site that's being developed for Progressive Rail Services.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. That's right.
So that area, it sounds like the city of Spokane Valley has done a lot to try to promote industrial development and infrastructure in that area. So I feel like any projects that are near there are going to certainly benefit from that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so Katera's building their big plant out there, and I don't know exactly what Progressive Rail is doing with their site, but they have 100 acres, roughly 100 acres out there. So, yeah, lots of activities in this fairly remote part of the valley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, maybe we'll see some of these industrial spaces start to open up again, and
Yeah. The market moderate a little bit. We'll see.
Exactly.
Well, I know you have to get to another interview, LeAnn. I appreciate you coming over and talking about this with us. We'll have to keep an eye on it. All right, thank you.
SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. On the JoB is brought to you by our friends at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Ask Lynn a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com.